The 2014 NFL Draft begins tomorrow night. We are extremely fortunate to have one of the most brilliant minds in football right here on the Gulf Coast. Reese's Senior Bowl Executive Director Phil Savage is here this morning to break down the NFL Draft. Phil, great to see you, man.
Good morning, Joe.
Well, I can tell you,
it's almost here.
It is.
The draft.
You know what? This year, if you paid attention, it's later than usual this year, and there's been so much analysis that's going on forever, so it is finally almost here. You are right. Let's start with things that our local audience will care about. That's the Alabama players and the Auburn players. We'll start with Alabama. Who has the potential to go high in the draft? We've got a screen on the board right here.
Well, you see on the graphic there, Alabama's got probably 10 to 12 players that could go in the overall draft Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It's a three-day event. But first rounders, look for HaHa Clinton-Dix to go potentially as high as number 10 to Detroit, potentially as low as 21 to Green Bay. The Pack would love to have a player of his caliber. C.J. Mosley, another player from Alabama, likely to go in the first round. I look at Baltimore at pick number 17, or maybe even your Green Bay Packers at 21 as well. And then Cyrus Kouandjio, the offensive tackle, 19 to Miami would be his high water mark. Maybe the Carolina Panthers at 28. They're in desperate need of an offensive tackle.
Kevin Norwood, A.J. McCarron's receiver on the board as well. But let's talk about A.J., the kid from Mobile, has a chance to go. We see on the screen here, second through fourth round. Some say late first round, some say as late as the fourth round. Who knows where this guy's going to go? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've talked a lot about A.J. McCarron over the last year or so in terms of his draft prospects. And I think if you took all 32 teams, there would be a handful of teams that have him in the first round, a handful of teams that have him in the fourth round, but I think the vast majority have him in the second or third round area. And his draft status will be impacted by what happens at the top of the draft in terms of some of the other quarterbacks that are rated higher going in to Thursday night.
Sometimes you see a run on a position, a run on quarterbacks that could help A.J. get drafted earlier rather than later, so we'll see about that. Now, Auburn players, they've got one of the most highly recruited people in the draft, this lineman Robinson. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Greg Robinson, 6'5", 332 pounds, ran 4.9 at the 40. At the Combine in Indianapolis. They had to put a runaway truck ramp to the side of the 40-yard dash for Greg Robinson, but he could go as high as number 2 to the St. Louis Rams. I don't think he will get out of the top 5. Cleveland at number 4. The Oakland Raiders at number 5. He's a big-time road grader, can really move the line of scrimmage. Needs to work on his pass protection some, but he's a player that's got a big upside. D. Ford is another player. Had an outstanding Reese's Senior Bowl week here. Look for him to go somewhere in the late first round, early second. And then Trey Mason, who was really the heartbeat of that Auburn team in terms of their offensive production. I think he'll go in the second or third round, but I look for him to have a productive career in the NFL.
Yeah, and there was D. Ford, the Reese's Senior Bowl MVP right there. Now, moving on to the Saints, our kind of local-ish NFL team. What are their needs this year?
Well, the Saints are sitting at pick 27. There's been a lot of talk that they would try to move up and grab one of these elite wide receivers, but at the end of the day, I think they could stay at 27 and grab a wide receiver to pair up with Marcus Colston and Kenny Stills and some of the other players that they have there with Drew Brees. You know, a linebacker and edge rusher, that's where D. Ford certainly could come into the picture for the New Orleans Saints at that level of the draft. They really need a center. They couldn't line up and play a game this weekend if they had to because they do not have a center literally on their roster. But they usually fill that spot later in the draft, and I suspect that they would not use a first round or even a second round pick on center. And then cornerback, always a huge need. You look at their division, Cam Newton in Carolina. You look at Matt Ryan in Atlanta with Julio Jones and Roddy White. And then Tampa Bay with the potential of taking Johnny Manziel, and I know that's where we're going next. But you look at the need for cornerback, the Saints could certainly look at a guy like Jason Verrett from TCU, maybe at the bottom of the first round.
All right, you brought him up. He's kind of the fun person to talk about in this year's draft. Johnny Football, polarizing, so many different opinions. What's yours?
Well, I'll be honest, Joe. I was a bit of a doubter a year ago, even though A&M had come in and beaten Alabama. And he won the Heisman Trophy. But I will say that over last spring, the summer, during the fall, seeing him a second time against Alabama, I'm a believer that he's not for all 32 teams, but I think a team will take him and shape an offense around his skill set, which is so unique. And as we move into this era of basketball on grass, which you're seeing that type of football
Right.
trickle from the college level into the NFL, I really look for Johnny Manziel to go to number 7, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Lovie Smith, their new head coach, spent an entire year studying college football, the NFL, and I think he believes that Johnny Manziel is the kind of player that you need in the NFL now.
In which case, you'd have Jadeveon Clowney going overall number 1 of the Texans?
I think there's going to be the huge surprise Thursday night.
Ooh.
Khalil Mack out of the University of Buffalo really is a truer fit in their defensive scheme.
Wow.
And I think that they've had some real reservations about taking Jadeveon Clowney. So therefore, I'm looking for the Texans to not be able to trade and take Khalil Mack number 1 overall and look for Jadeveon Clowney to slip to number 3 to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
That is very interesting. All right, if you want to watch this again and do some research and compare it to what happens tomorrow night, it will be online later today. Phil Savage, Reese Senior Bowl Executive Director, thank you so much for coming in
All
today.
right, Joe, good enough.
Appreciate it.